and their families for more than 15 years. And that the result of that is 1 month ago that a community of veteran organizations, 11 organizations and 4 experts in the areas of veteran rehabilitation, signed a letter. This community of veterans organizations represents over 500,000 veterans and family members and supportive Canadians. And they signed a unanimous letter to endorse what are 3 reports. One is the Special Needs Advisory Group report, the other one is a Gerontological Advisory Group, and the other one is a New Veterans Charter Advisory Group report. That at best, perhaps 10% of the recommendations in those 3 reports have been implemented. That the truth is that we should not be talking about cutbacks at Veterans Affairs, but we should be talking about budgetary increases. And I refer to the insurance company mentality that if upon joining, if the government was so forward-thinking as an insurance company as to put aside money for each member that joined, then we would have a situation where veterans are not being punished because of poor and incompetent fiscal management. Unbeknownst to Canadians, and I think it would become a huge surprise, the government doesn't actually put aside money for veterans when they join. They don't put aside money for veterans when they're wounded. They don't put aside money for those veterans forward thinking about what their treatment, their compensation, or their income loss will cost. That this comes out of annual revenues. So when we face a fiscal cutback such as we are this year, that veterans are being punished because of incompetent and unprofessional management at Veterans Affairs Canada. This is wholly wrong. Before we even showed up at these budgetary cuts, Veterans Affairs has already committed to a $500 million cut over 2 years. That they've already committed to 500 jobs being cut from Veterans Affairs. On top of that, we're talking a further 5 to 10% decrease in the employees. The truth is that for Veterans Affairs to implement what 500,000 veterans and supporters have asked for will cost more money, and that money should have been set aside long ago. So this isn't about partisan support for for restraining cutbacks at Veterans Affairs. What we're talking about is that soldiers that go off and serve at their country's order do it at Parliament's order, not at any particular party's order. So that this should be a non-partisan, all-party supported measure. And that I call upon the government and Canadians to stand up and fight for veterans, just as the way that veterans, when they were in uniform, have and are willing to lose their lives to support Canadians. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. And I now invite Helen Rapp to say a few words, please.
Thank you, Peter. Well, I'm following 2 very good speakers that gave you a lot of statistics. I'm talking about the women. I'm talking about the soldiers, airmen, and sailors from the Second World War, Korea, and Afghanistan, and up to today, where our soldiers and our service military people are going. We need help. Now, Veterans Affairs has said through the Minister of Veterans Affairs that there won't be any cuts. We will not feel anything. Nothing will be different. It's got to be different. They cannot go along the way they're doing. Families are broken up because they can't get the help. I've been lucky. I'm under Veterans Affairs myself for disability that I contacted during the Second World War, not the first.
Right.
And so I've been with Veterans Affairs many, many years. We used to have a counselor that spoke to each and every one of us. That's not the case anymore. I phoned, I'm in Charlottetown, I'm in Montreal, I'm in Sudbury. It's very difficult to get an answer. But I know the ropes now. And so I just phone Veterans Affairs and I speak to my old counselor. And she has been excellent. But they are backlogged in cases that need immediate attention, and they're not getting it. So speaking as a wife of two veterans, I married 2 veterans. One died, I married another one. And they're under Veterans, they were under Veterans Affairs along with myself, so that's 3. So we know Veterans Affairs very well. And I've met the minister, and he's assured us that treatments will not be cut we'll be well looked after. But I hope and pray that we will, and that the new veterans will be looked after, because the war you're fighting now is not the war we fought. You don't know who your enemy is, and I just cannot get my mind around how you fared. And we feel that everything that should be done, Canada should really respect and show their love for us and for what you did, not cut the pensions, not cut the treatments. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. And as you can tell, folks, from World War II right on to today, there's a sisterhood and brotherhood among the veteran community that is untouchable. And many, many veterans are helping other veterans cut through that sort of Gordian knot of bureaucracy in order to try to get the help that they require. And some of the concerns, of course, is what's going to happen to long-term care facilities when, for example, St. Anne's transfers over, and when the last Korean veteran dies. What happens to all those 10,000 contract beds in the country? For example, Sarah Atwood, who's 90 years old, in the final stages of her life, was denied access to Camp Hill Hospital in Halifax. Why? Because she didn't dip her toe in the Atlantic. She didn't serve overseas. She served her country. Her country asked her to serve in the domestic services here in Canada. She served World War II, but was she denied a long-term care facility because she wasn't overseas. So she falls upon the province in order to get the assistance she requires. And what will be happening is that the federal government will be downloading these services onto the provinces. And on more on that, I invite my colleague Irene Matheson from London Fanshawe to say a few more words on that, please. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Peter, and it is a privilege to be here with veterans, the advocates and supporters of veterans, and I want to say thank you to you, Peter, for bringing forward this motion. It is absolutely essential that Canadians know what is happening to the men and women who served this country with such dignity and distinction. We know that 40,000 Canadian Forces members have been deployed to Afghanistan since 2001. And recent studies tell us that 8% of those were diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and a further 5% with some kind of Afghan-related operational stress injury. So it's very clear that these people who serve their country with such honor will need some form of long-term care. And let's not forget the modern-day vets, the peacekeepers who went to Cyprus and walked the Green Line, to Bosnia and opened mass graves, went to the Middle East and were exposed to depleted uranium. And of course, Navy vets who were on ships loaded with asbestos. All of these people responded when their country asked them to serve. And now it's time for Canada, for the country to respond to the needs of these veterans. As been said, St. Anne's is going to be devolved to the province. Now the problem is, or the issue is, that within St. Anne's, there is a staff with incredible expertise. Those 1,300 people have incredible knowledge, understanding, and they're able to give the kind of specialized care veterans deserve. That's all being devolved to the province, and there's no guarantee that any of those 1,300 will be employed by the new provincial hospital. And you add in the 500 personnel who will be removed from Veterans Affairs, you've got a 40% decrease in the personnel who are able to deliver services to veterans. All downloaded to the provinces, and if they can't manage, then it'll be downloaded to communities and to families. And it will be families who have to take up that incredible task, that important task of looking after our veterans. Very clearly, it's time for the Government of Canada to remember that it made a promise to the veterans of this country. When they offered their lives and their energies to promote the interests of Canada, to serve, to protect, we made a promise back as a nation, and we promised to honor and respect those veterans. It's not happening. The veterans in my community are very, very upset. I have Parkwood Hospital in London Fanshawe, and I talk to modern-day vets all the time. And they want guarantees that they will have access to the same level of expertise as their predecessors did, that they will be able to go to a veterans hospital where there is a staff that understands them, that instinctively understands the culture of those who served, and who can respond in a very humanistic way to their situation. I can't guarantee that, because the mandate that the government insists must be maintained says no one after Korea. Absolutely unacceptable. I want to tell you a little bit about long-term care in Ontario and what will happen to those veterans. Basically, a lot of our long-term care facilities are for profit. They're understaffed, and they don't have this collective understanding of veterans' needs. I've been to long-term care facilities after Remembrance Day and seen veterans cry because there was no remembrance service. There was nothing to acknowledge what they, as veterans, had given to this country. And because these facilities are understaffed and the staff is overworked, veterans very often are not given the care they need. It's not unusual. In fact, it's mandated that a diaper has to be 70% full before it can be changed. If you can imagine that kind of indignity, it speaks volumes to the changes that have to happen for our veterans, for our RCMP veterans, and for the spouses of those veterans. So we're asking this government to have what we call a health centers of excellence plan for the use of modern-day veterans. The continuation of long-term care facilities, veterans hospitals, not just for veterans and RCMP retirees, but for their spouses. Imagine after 55, 60 years of marriage to be separated from the one you love because there's no proper facility. So, healthcare centers of excellence as a response to and to honor the veterans who served us so well. I thank you for your attention to this, and again, I thank the people here who also care about veterans and who honor them every day in all that they do.
Thank you, Irene. And before I invite Nick Papillon from Quebec to come up, I also want to mention something that Sean had touched on. The mission in World War II does not end until the very last person that served in World War II crosses the bar. Just like when John Babcock passed away in April of '09, World War I did not end until that person passed away. And then what happens is the collective history of Canada to remember what happened in World War I or the Boer War. Afghanistan right now, we have veterans that are 20 years old. They may require care until they're 80, 90, 100 years old. We simply don't know. But we have heard it say that for every dollar in a military operation that you allocate, you have to allocate at least 3 for the long-term care of those individuals that come back to the rest of their natural lives. That's the obligation, that's the contract, that's the deal. And Canada is not fulfilling its end of the bargain. And at this time, I'd like to invite Nick Papillon, our Deputy Critic of the Federal NDP of Veterans Affairs, to say en français to wrap up our press conference as well. And then afterwards, we'd be happy to take any questions that the media have. Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Nick?
Merci, Peter. Merci à tout le monde aussi de vous être déplacé pour justement écouter cette motion qui est extrêmement importante pour nous. Cette motion, elle vise justement à soutenir concrètement, très sérieusement, les anciens combattants que nous avons tous à cœur. Je pense que la population est toujours unanime à dire qu'on veut absolument qu'ils reçoivent les soins nécessaires lorsqu'ils en ont besoin. Lorsqu'on voit des sondages où on demande justement à la population ce qu'ils en pensent, ils sont unanimes pour dire qu'on doit les soutenir. Et cette motion-là qu'on dépose, on espère justement que le gouvernement va l'appuyer parce que